Whenever I am trying to learn a new stack or to implement a new framework or something into a project, what I like to do is create to-do lists. And the reason I like to do that is because it handles all of the core functionality, meaning the CRUD. So creating, reading, update, delete. Once I start getting comfortable with it, then I can expand to adding more functionality and things like that. But really, it's just to familiarize myself with how things work, how things interact with each other, what to do, what not to do, why this works, why this doesn't work. Essentially, that's what that's about. A few years ago, I had created this playlist, which only really has a two-part series on implementing Livewire. And I thought that now would be a good time for me to start learning React, especially because it has been included in Laravel 12 as a main starter pack. And it's something that I have kind of wanted to learn. Now, whether or not I stick with it, who knows? But for now, I just want to have an idea of how it works. This way I can answer questions better when people ask me things like, how would you do this in React or something like that? It will make me better informed at being able to answer those questions. So today we are going to recreate this to-do list, but we are going to use React instead of Livewire. What I have done as a supplement to this is created a gist, which is going to house the template for the to-do list. And this way it'll make things a lot easier. So when I do pick up something else to use it, I will already have this layout. This is the same layout that came from that Livewire to-do list that I showed you. It's the exact same layout with some tweaks just for spacing and such like that. But this is essentially what we have to work with. The reason I did this is to make it easier for you so that you don't have to download it if you don't want to, but if you do want to download it, then you can. You can do whatever you want with it, but this will be a template for me to reference so that we can go through this a little bit easier. This is going to be linked down in the description for you so that you guys can access this as well. Now, what I've done in preparation for this, I've already created a Laravel project with the React starter kit, and I'm just using the basic authentication for it. We're not going to be needing it, so it doesn't really matter, but that's what I do have. And I'll show you exactly what we're working with, but I have already whipped this up, so I won't be showing you that on the front end either because everyone does this differently. Just know that I've already done it. Once you've gotten up to this point, then you'll be able to continue along with the rest of it. Now, if we head into the terminal so that we can see what we are working with, we'll start here with the composer.json. As you can see, I am using inertia.js. That's with the starter kit. And as you can see here, we are using Laravel 12, and that's really the most important thing from here. I'm going to try my hand at some of the TypeScript, but I don't know if the LSP is going to behave today, so we will see. But as you can see, the inertia.js React, it is at version 2.0.0. The other thing that we are going to be using here is Tailwind CSS. I am using version 4 of Tailwind CSS, and TypeScript is already in here as well as Vite at version 6.0. So just that we're all on the same page and we know what we're working with. The things that we are going to need is basically, we'll just use the welcome view. I am going to create a model, a controller, and a migration for this, also a factory, so that we can seed some temporary to-dos to have in our page. So we'll head into the terminal and then we'll do PHP artisan, make, we'll start with the model, it'll be to-do, and for this we'll have the migration, a factory, a controller, and then I want to make that controller resourceable, so we will do that. And that'll pretty much print out everything that we need. Let's go over to the backend in here and let's start. First, I want to do the migration because that is the easiest, or I will forget to do it later. And in here, I am just going to need two fields. So the first one will be a string. And then the item for that will just be item. The next one will be a Boolean. And this Boolean will be whether or not something is completed. I also want to give this a default of 0. By default, everything will be false. So any of our to-dos that we have will be not completed. Let's go over to the factory. Well, we'll start with the model just so that we know what we have in here. Now, the model is only going to need the fields. We'll do protected, fillable, equals, we'll do item, and whether or not it is completed. That's all we need for that. And we don't need the relationship to the user because we're not really going to be storing for any specific user. We'll go down to the factory and start working on that. And again, in here, it's going to be really simple. The only thing we'll do is item, and we'll say that this Baker sentence. And then for these, I'll just do completed. We don't really need to have it in here because we did set it as default, but I'm just going to put it as 0 here just for consistency. We'll save that, and then these factories are closed. We are done with that. We can just come down here. And then I will get rid of this user factory since we're not needing it. I'll uncomment this one out, and this will be to-do factory. And then we'll just create 10 just like it is up here. So let's also import that. And then up here, we can get rid of this user since we're not using that at all. And right now we should be able to see the database. Because we have a new table, we need to migrate it, and then we need to seed it. That's good. Now I am trying out a new MySQL database thing, and so we'll see how it goes. I don't know. We'll go to to-dos, which we now have. We have item, completed. Let's see, content, to-dos. There we go. We have the ID, we have the item, and then all the completeds are at 0, and then we have the created at and updated at just like intended. We do have 10 items because that is what we seeded into the database, and this should be good to go for now. Let's start working on getting something set up for the front end. Well, the first thing that I would like to start with is the web routes. And I think I've decided that I'm not going to replace that welcome view. I'm going to create a new one. So we'll say route, get to-dos. We're going to use the new to-do controller class, and it'll just be index. The name will just be to-dos index. It has been imported up top here. Save that, and then we will go over to that, close this out. And all I want to do here is return inertia render, and our page is going to be to-dos. And then we are going to pass in 2 props. Because we are going to set up completed from incompleted, that's what we're going to do. So we'll say completed or complete to-dos. And then we're just going to say to-do where completed is 1. And then we'll grab the latest so that we have the most recent one at the very top. We'll say get. We'll do the same for incomplete to-dos where completed equals 0. And now we should have both those properties able to be properties in our front end. Make sure that was imported, and we already did that, so that's good. We'll go down to resources, pages, and our page is going to be todos.tsx because we are living on the edge today. Now I'm going to be using TSX because I do want to kind of start getting a little bit of a TypeScript feel for things. As I said, I've never really used it. It just seems really busy to me, but I feel like React also seems kind of busy to me, so I am going to keep that. I may not have it in here yet, but there are completions for this as well. But if you're coming from Vue, then you're used to seeing something like a setup, like script setup and template and stuff like that. But things are very different here. Here, there's going to be an export default function. Now, because the page is called to-dos, and that's what we are working on, we're going to call this to-dos, and that will be the function. I'm going to open this up. Now, this I've also seen as function to-dos, and then export default to-dos. I've also seen that like this, but this is just a shortened way of doing it. And so that's what I'm going to keep here. Now, because we are using TypeScript with this, TypeScript allows us to sort of define different properties to be rendered in the template or the DOM or whatever it is called in React. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to create what's called an interface. Well, I'm going to create two of them, but the first one is going to be for our to-do. And here is where we are just basically defining what that to-do is made up of. Our to-do is going to have an ID, and that ID will be number. And then it also will have the item, which will be a string. So that's whatever makes up our to-do list. And the completed is going to be a Boolean. These are all of the properties that make up every to-do, whether it's incomplete or complete. Every to-do is going to have these three different things in them, and that's what we're defining in this interface. I want to also create another one called page props. And the page props is going to define what are the props that we are bringing into this template. So for us, we have two that we have coming in from the controller that we need. One is going to be the complete to-dos. And that complete to-dos, we can now say, is defined by this interface up here, by this to-do up here. Our complete to-dos will be defined by this, and that's all we need to do for here. Now, the incomplete to-dos are the exact same thing. The only difference in the two of them is whether or not they are completed, but they still are made up of these different pieces of the to-do. That's all good. Now here, in order to bring this in, we're going to say const. We're going to bring in that complete to-dos, and we are also going to bring in that incomplete to-dos, and then we are going to use page. As you can see, it was imported up top because this is coming in from Inertia.js React. We can use page to now let the template know and everything in this function here know that we are using the properties from this page props in this function right here. Use page.props, and we're going to say we're going to use them as the page props because this page props is being defined up here in this interface. Everything in this interface is what we are going to use in this use page. Now, what we can do is we can return. In here, for now, all I want to do is put, well, see, this is where things get a bit tricky. For example, in view, this is the best way that I can describe it. If you have template tags in here, in view 2, if you were going to have, let's say, a div of something here, really need to update these. And then want to have a div or 3 divs in here as the root of the template. In view 2, this wasn't acceptable. If this was the case and you wanted 3 divs like here, then what you would have to do is open this up and move them in here so that the root of the template had 1 div. And it's the same idea in here. If you want to return some sort of element that has multiple, like I just showed you, then you would have to do this. And then at the bottom of it would be the closing of that. And everything else could be in here. So this would work. Let's just do this. This would work. And that's the basic idea. Now, if you only had one, if you say had one root, just like it is here, then you wouldn't need this and you wouldn't need this and you wouldn't get any errors. Everything is all good. But in view 3, they have changed it so that you can have multiple. You don't have to just have the one anymore. Clearly, that's not the way it is here. What I am going to do is I'm going to bring these back because we are going to have a head and then we are going to have the rest of the render. Well, since we're here, why don't we go ahead, grab our template and see how we can make this work. From here, I'm only going to be using what's in the body tag. So we'll grab that and now in here, I am just going to paste that in between those. Let's see what it is we have to fix. Well, let me straighten this up. First, we need to import this head, and this head is actually coming from inertia.js. So let's see, that was imported up top correctly. Then we have the links, and let me close this out. We need more space in here. Those don't have any classes on it, but funnily enough, in React, instead of doing class name should be like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of all of them. And anywhere where there's class, I am going to change to class name. And that should have taken care of all of that for us. Let's just see if we can see this first before we start plugging anything in. And again, because we are going to have two root elements, which is one is the header and the rest is this div, we are going to keep these brackets in here like this. In our browser, we should be able to go to Todos. And of course, I see nothing. Let's see why. Input, let me see what that's about. Our form input. Oh, I have ref in here. We are going to be needing ref, but in order to get something to just display, I don't really need it. So we'll do that. We'll try it again. There it is. So we have a little input in here. These turn into inputs and we should be good. Our buttons are a little big. We'll adjust that a little bit later, but for now, at least we have something showing in the template. I'm also going to install the extension for React because I don't have it on this computer, and we will do that. Okay, so I have just installed the React developer tools from my Chrome browser store. If you're using anything else, you should be able to get it, but this is the name of it. And it will work like the Vue dev tools in terms of being able to see the components and being able to get information from that. Go ahead, refresh. I might have to close this and open it again. It will come to pass, but as you can see, this is now lit up because this page is using the development build of React. There's also one for if it's in production. I will come back to this, but just as long as you have it installed, we're good from there. In order to display these complete and incomplete to-dos in this render here, we are going to have to loop over an array within here, so there's no separate place to do it. I can't really tell you how I feel about this anyway, but it doesn't really matter. This is something that we're working with, but the way that they do it in React is to basically loop over it right within the DOM in here, or whatever this is called. I'm just going to call it the render. So for now, I'm just going to get rid of this form. We'll put it in later, but here we are. Under this flex call is where we are going to be looping over the rest of this, which will have the line for the complete, the undo buttons, and the input for the form. Instead of doing it in the div like we would do in Vue, in here, we would make some curly brackets, and then we'll use that incomplete to-dos property that we have, and then we are going to map it so that we can get into it. I'm going to call the variable incomplete. I'm going to use an index, and then we'll do an equal sign parentheses, and we're going to open that up. So this in here, this whole div set right in here, I'm going to take it and I'm going to paste it in here because this is where we're displaying over everything. Now, I'm sure I will have an error somewhere along the line, but let's see, go down here, make sure that's okay. Just do it like that, and then we'll figure it out as we go. Now we have the class name, and I'm going to put this on a different line. And this class name is going to need a key. Very much like Vue, it will need a key. And then that key, instead of equal sign, it'll be curly brackets. And then we'll put the index in here because each of them individually will need to be referenced by a specific item that's just for that. Now, for simplicity, I am going to remove this form in here. We will come back to it, but for now, I think it's just going to be a little bit too complicated. So we'll do div. And then here I want another div. And for now, I'm going to put a class name on it. and that's going to equal cursor pointer. As I said, we're going to change this, but for now, this will be fine. I just want to be able to see it. So it'll be one single bracket and incomplete dot item, just so that we can see the name. And then this is fine here. This is fine here. And we'll do the same thing for the complete to-dos. Grab this. And then instead of incomplete here, it'll be complete and complete. Let's just see if we can see this now. Okay, unexpected token on line. Let me refresh just to be sure. Yep, on line 68. 68 is here. Oh, this is the one that I wasn't sure about. Closing div, and then that's fine, but I do need another closing parentheses in here, and that should fix that. Let's do that down here as well. Now we should be good. Great. As you can see, we have our buttons. There's nothing under the to-dos done because we haven't done anything there yet, but at least now we can see the completed at and stuff, and it does have that cursor pointer. Let me see if I can open up the inspection tools and see if we're actually getting components right in here. Let's move this back up here, and components is here. And as you can see, it's got the to-dos page and it's got the auth, which is, we have no authenticated user. It has complete to-dos. There's nothing in here. We have our incomplete to-dos, and these are our list of to-dos. Let me make that a little bit better. And we're not going to be using that now, so I'll just close it, but I'm just glad I got it working. Let's go and reconfigure this a little bit better because, as you can see, doing everything within that one little function is going to get very messy. So I want to change this so that we make this its own folder with its own page, and then we'll be able to separate these and do what we need to do in here. So what I'm going to do here is we'll go back up to the controller, and in here we'll change this. I'm going to make this a capital T, and it will be a to-dos folder. In that to-dos folder, we'll have the index, and that's how we're going to separate this, because we're going to make a bunch of components and I want them all to be in this to-dos folder. Let's come here. We can close this. We'll go to pages, and then we'll create another folder called to-dos. And in here will be index.tsx. I'm going to grab everything in here. Paste it in here, and I didn't apparently grab the top part. Now we should be able to get rid of this, and everything should still be the same. Let's just double check that before we move on. Refresh, and everything is still here like intended. Now that we have this all set up, we can actually extract all of this so that the completed and the incompleted will have each their own separate components. Then we'll be able to chop up the index page and make it a little bit cleaner and more readable for us. Let's start first by taking these completed or these incompleted, and then whatever the completed is, and then extract them into their own components. We can pass in the type, all that stuff can be passed into them, and then we'll continue on from there. But for now, that's what I want to do. Let's go ahead and separate these into two different components, and then we'll continue on from there. In this pages component, as I said, everything is going to be in the same thing. I will create a complete to-dos. This will actually be a component, but it's going to also be TSX. And then I want to copy this to incomplete to-dos TXX. We'll come here first, and then we will grab which is the incomplete. The incomplete should be here. and I am going to snag the whole thing, paste it in here. Well, before we paste it, we do need to name this. So it'll be export default function complete to-dos will return, and it's only going to have one root item. So this is fine. Even though we have complete to-dos up here, we're going to have to end up passing in something. And what we're going to pass in, I'm going to call item. This does need to be in curly brackets because it is a property coming from that other component. And we'll do that just like that. So we haven't passed anything in here yet. We will fix that now just so that it is clear. Now where we took that out from, we're going to bring in that component in complete to-dos. And then we will close that off. Now in this incomplete to-dos, we're going to pass in items. So we'll say that items equals incomplete to-dos. Now we need to import this component up top, which I might be able to do from here. We'll see. If not, it's fine. We'll do it manually, which we do have to do manually. To import, it's going to be import incomplete to-dos from, since we're in the same folder, it'll be incomplete to-dos.tsx. I'll do the same for complete while we're up here. Save, and that should be good. So now that we have this, must have done that. Now that we have items, we're going to be able to use those items in that component. Let's do that up here. And this items needs to be plural because that's what it is that we're passing it. Now, when we're looping over the array, this will now be items. So we can leave incomplete the same. We can leave the index the same. Key will still be index. All of this other stuff should be the same too, because we are using incomplete as the value. And all the rest of the information should be the same. Let's just see if that is the case. We go ahead and refresh, then nothing has changed and we are using our component. And if I open up the inspect tools, we'll go to components and let's see, complete to-dos. And as you can see, the items are being passed in correctly, just like intended. Let's go ahead and do the same thing for the to-dos done, and we'll continue on from there. Because everything is the exact same, we can copy all of this, put it into our complete to-dos. So this should be incomplete. Incomplete to-dos. And that should be right. Let's fix this. Incomplete to-dos. Incomplete to-dos. Incomplete to-dos is fine. Complete to-dos is also fine. We also have items being passed in, and instead of complete, incomplete, it'll be complete. We'll change this to complete to-dos, and now we should be able to get rid of these. Save that and just make sure that we're all good there. So far, so good, no errors. And let's check our components, make sure that they're both showing up. So we have complete, there's nothing in here, obviously, and the incomplete is still the same. We have those components set up. Now I want to break this up even further. And the reason I want to break it up one more time is because I'm not sure if it's the same in React as it is with Vue, but in Vue, whenever you're looping over an item and then you have buttons that have to do something with that specific item, it makes it a lot easier to separate this into one component, especially if it's being looped over a bunch of times. And that's the case for us where we have to-dos and then we have a bunch of to-dos and then we have not to-dos that are also a bunch of the same item. So what I would typically do is create another component that is just specific for this one line, but it is still being looped over in the completed or the incompleted component. And the reason I do that is because let's say I had a loader on here, and if I was to click this button, the loader would show up in all of these buttons when I just click this one. It's just a little bit of a quirk that happens where you can fix that, you can do that, but it's so much easier to just separate it into its own component that you don't have to do any weird workarounds, right? So that's what I'm going to do, and that's what we're going to do. So let's go and do that. So to do this, I'm going to grab one, let's just say the incomplete, and I will grab everything that's in the div here. And then I'm going to create another component, and I'm going to call it to do item.tsx. And we're going to export default. And this is going to be our function. So I'll do return. And then for now, I'll just paste in that whole grouping of stuff. But what are we passing in here? Well, we are passing in the to-do. Let's go back to the incomplete. Well, I forgot which one it was that I did. It's fine. We'll go to the incomplete first, and we will keep the heading on this. That's fine. But where we are looping over the items is what's going to change. So we can keep items map. It will be incomplete. We will not need the index in here. And then we'll put in that component. And that was imported up top, as you see here. We have the to-do item or the to-do item component. So what we are going to be passing in here is the to-do, because that's what we're receiving in that component. And the to-do that we're going to have is the incomplete. And here we can put the key. The key will be, I keep forgetting it's not parentheses. The key will be the incomplete ID so that we don't have to worry about having an index, and we don't need these. And that should be good. Now I can take this and remove it because we're not going to need this anymore. This is all in that new to-do item component. Now remember, because we are leveraging these in components, everything about this index where we're passing in the to-do type and the page props type is all being passed down into the rest of the components. That should be good here. And let's go and fix up that to-do item component so that we have just what we need in here. We've already passed in the to-do item, and then we're not going to need this header. We're not going to need any of this stuff here. Let's see what we have from the incomplete. In our item, missing a semicolon. Okay, I must have cut off something. As a matter of fact, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do this. I'm going to create a div. Well, we have a div here. And then I'm going to have a class name on it, which will just be flex justify between. And then we'll have this div here with the incomplete. And that one's done. Now this one is going to be flex basics 2. We have our buttons here, and that should be good. But this one should be mapped up here, and this one should be mapped to this thing here, and this thing should be mapped up here. Function. Let's go ahead and change this while we're here to do. And that should be that. So let's check this and see if it's still broken. Okay, I'll go ahead, refresh. Let me just make sure we don't have any errors, and we don't, and that's fine. So let's go and duplicate the same thing with our completed to-dos. Well, I am just going to go ahead and copy everything in this right here. And then in the complete to-dos, now I can just take everything in here, replace it with this, and instead of to-dos to-dos done. And the items, instead of complete or incomplete, will be complete. Also, we need to import this like so. Let's go and make sure we don't have any errors on the front end. refresh, and everything looks good. We still have everything looking just fine. Now that we have everything looking pretty much how we want it to look, I want to start working on the CRUD functionality of our little to-do list here. What I want to do is basically someone can click or tab into this input here, and I might have to change the coloring on it. I think because of circumstances of my environment and such, you can't really see it if it's not highlighted, and I want it to have at least like a grayish color or whatever, but we'll fix that in a minute. What I want to happen here is I want to be able to tab or click into this box here. I want someone to be able to type something and then press enter and have it submit. Then after that, I want this to clear if everything was successful. If it wasn't successful and there's some sort of validation error on it, I want that to display here. Let's go ahead and start working on how we're going to do that. So the first thing I would like to do is to go over to our web route. I'm going to copy and paste this one. This is going to be a post request. And the function will be store, which means the name will also be store. Save that and come over to our app to do controller. And we'll start working on that in here. What exactly are we doing here? Well, we're going to take it to do and we're going to create it, right? That's pretty much it. What do we need to add into here is the item. Because when we set up the database, we already set it up with a default value for completed. If you've just added something to the to-do list, it has not been completed yet. So that's already the default action. We don't have to do anything else about that. We can do the request item, and that's what we can get from the front end. Now, while we're here, why don't we also do the validation so that we have that set up for us as well? We'll say request validate, and validate will just be one item because it's just the request item. We'll say item. I'm going to keep this really simple. All I want to do is say that item is required. Let's go to that file, which is right in the index because we haven't changed anything. So that form input should be right here. Now, this is where that form is that we are going to be adding stuff into. But at first, we need to come up here to the beginning of the function, and then we need to set it up so that it can do that. If you're used to using Inertia with Vue, Inertia has this use form function that's really helpful for submitting stuff to the database. And it is something that's also in React, which we can use here. But the thing is, we can also add different sort of functions, data, information, stuff like that to this use form in order for it to work. We'll say const equals, and then for now, I'll just put use form, and I'm going to import that. And that's what we'll have here. Let's make sure that was imported up top for Inertia JS Vue, and it was up here. And so we can continue. Now, what we can do in this const is name a few things. Well, the first thing that we're going to need is some data, because that's the data that's going to be coming in from the form. And then we are going to need something called set data, which is going to set that data into the form. Now, because we are making a post request to submit this for the creation of an item, we're going to say post so that we have that in here. Now, the next thing is we are going to use errors so that we can display them on the front end. And the last is to reset. So we're just basically identifying which part of the use form function that we're going to need in order to submit stuff to the backend. In here, I'm just going to say item equals, and I'm going to put it in single quotations. It's just really going to be a string because that's all that we're submitting to the backend from the front end. Now, if you take a look at the Inertia.js documentation and you go down to where it says forms right under the basics, and then you click the React tab in here so that you can go to the specific one, you can see that if we head down a bit, you can see that there is a form helper. And this form helper describes to you all of the different parts that you're doing in here. So if we had a loading button, then we could use something like processing as well. And this is just the information that we're going to be putting into the form, and then we are going to submit. it is going to be using an event for our case. And then we're going to use that submit function in this on submit. It uses a lot of vanilla JavaScript to do certain things, which on submit, I believe, is one. On change, things like that are vanilla JavaScript. It's a bit weird how they do it, but I'm trying to get used to it. But if it's an input, we'll do on change, we set the data, and the data is going to be set from whatever is in that target value that we have. We're going to do that physically so that you can see what I mean by that. But in this const, I just wanted to show you in the form, you can bring in all of these other different things and then just match them to wherever you're going to need them from. That's what we're going to do. So now that we have the use form set up, we can go ahead and start to create our function. Quite simply, I'm going to do add to do. I'm going to say it's equal. This is all I want for the function for right now. First, let's start by filling in those details that we're passing into the use form. We're going to pass them into here. For a form, we're going to do on submit equals add to do. That's the function that we just named, and that's what we're going to be using. We have a type of text. We're going to need a value in here, and that value is going to be data item, because this property is going to be in that input property, that data that we're bringing into the form. That's how we're just delineating it here. It'll be the data item. This is what we're going to fill in. This input is going to be this data item, and this data item is what's going to be submitted in this add to do form function, submit function. So we have data item, and because I don't want a button click or anything on here, I'm going to say on change equals, we need an event. That event is going to set the data. The data that it's going to set is going to be item, and we are going to put in that item the event target value. I know this seems a bit confusing. Vue handles this differently. You wouldn't put all this stuff in here, but here we are, right? I don't want to have to keep comparing it, but that's where we are. If there's an error, we need to make some changes in here. So I'm going to say, I'll start it here. Open up some single curly brackets, and we'll say errors item, because the item is what we're using. It's what's being passed into the form, the item. So if there's an errors item, and then we need to grab this, paste it here, and then we close that off. This still isn't here. I'm going to I'll grab this, the rest of the div, pass it in here. And this some error here is just our text that we had. So I'm going to just change that to the item so that when the validation comes back, we'll know what the error is for that item. We'll close off the div, and then we'll close off that external bracket. And this should be here. Let me open this up just so that you can see it a bit better. Go ahead and save and head up top so that we can get that submit function working. Now, since we're bringing in the event, we'll have access to the event up here. And I am going to see if I can just console log out the event. Let's see if we can see that. I'm going to go ahead and refresh. I'm just going to type in some stuff in here, press enter. Well, you see our first issue. When I type something in, press enter, it goes through the JavaScript of refreshing the page and getting rid of it. We do need to fix that. In here, before we console log it out, we need to do event.prevent default, and this will prevent the default JavaScript need to refresh the page. Go ahead, refresh, and we'll try it again. Enter. Now you see we have an event in here, and you can get some information. You see the target, we have the form dot value is what we're looking for. And I can't actually see it, but we'll see if we can narrow it down to that. We'll do e.target.value. Type something in, press enter, and now it's been undefined. You can't actually see it because it's already technically gone through. Why don't we just go ahead, send it to the backend, and then see what happens from there. Now, because we are already in the form, I'm going to get rid of that. Because we are already in the form, all we need to do here is the post request. So we'll say post. The route that we're posting to is the to-dos store. And here we can do preserve scroll is true. And then on success, we'll say that that equals the reset that we're calling up in the use form. This is part of the helpers that are coming in from inertia. Let's try it and see how we do. Go ahead, refresh this. We'll do something, enter. As you can see, there it is. If we don't type in anything, we press enter, the item field is required. And we can actually even customize this so that it says something else. I'm going to go back to the to-do controller. And then where we are creating this, we can customize the message. I'll do a comma, straight brackets, and here is where we'll put our message. So the item, when it's required, will equal to-do is required. Let's try it and see how that goes. Press enter, a to-do is required. Great. Now we are able to create stuff. A to-do was made. Now, because I haven't styled this up, the input, I am going to use the component that came with the installation. I believe it comes from Shad CN. The UI, we can use that so that we can see this better because I can't see anything here at all. Now, to do this, we can just change it here. And this is actually coming from the components UI input from the Shad CN UI components. We can go ahead and use that here. And all that requires is for us to do capital and then import it. Make sure it's coming from the correct one, which is this one. Go up top, and I don't need that. Here we are. This is the input that we're bringing in. So let's go and check and make sure that that's correct. Okay, and there it is. You can see we have a nice little ring. We refresh, it looks like that. And then when we focus, it is like that. Now, the next thing that I want to do is I want to make these into editable things. What I mean by that is when we click on this, I don't want it to go anywhere, but what I want it to do is I want it to look like an input box like this. And then I want to be able to edit that so that we can change what the to-do is saying. We're not making it complete or incomplete. All we're doing is updating what this to-do is. Let's go ahead and do that. So to do this, we are going to the web routes and we're going to create that route. I'm going to copy this one. This one will be patch. It will be to-do / to-do. This will be update. And this too will be update. Save that, go over to the to-do controller. And then I am going to copy this because it's going to be the same behavior or similar behavior. And we'll put it in the update function. Now, because we already have the to-do coming in, or we should at this point, instead of doing to-do create, we'll do to-do update. And then the item equals the request item because that's all that we're changing in here. Let's go to the to-do item because now the item is going to be whether it's complete or incomplete. This function will work for both. All this knows is that it is a to-do, and that to-do is something that we want to change. Since a lot of it is going to be the same, I am going to copy this function here. Well, I'll copy both of them. We'll go into the item, and above the return, I'll go ahead, paste that in, and then we'll take out what we don't need. So we need data, we need set data. Our function is going to be patch. We'll have errors, reset. We're not actually going to be needing reset, so we can get rid of that. And let me also make sure to import this. So use form from inertia React. Now our add to do is going to be an update to do. And we are also going to have the event. Here we are going to change this to patch. And then this will be update. And then we need to pass in the to-do. preserve scroll on success. And for now, I'll just keep this empty because we are going to be doing something if it is successful. Let's head into the item here and let's get that sorted. Here I am going to change this to the form. And then we're not going to need a class on this anymore because it's going to be an input, but we will say on submit update to do because that's the name of our function. We are going to need an input. I don't want to use the input coming in from shadcn because the shadcn has very specific styling and I don't want that styling on here. Let's close that off. The type will be text. The class name will be p2. We're going to give it a value, and that value is going to be data item, just like it was before. And then here we'll say on change. We'll grab the event. We'll say that that equals set data. We're going to pass in the item. And then we're going to say that that equals the target value. And let's also grab the errors thing so I don't have to type that ridiculousness again. That'll just be under here. And then I can get rid of this and that should be good. Let me just make sure that this says errors item. And it does. Great. Let's head up here and let's see how that goes. So as you can see, we can't actually see anything yet, but we do have inputs in here, which is fine. But we do need to change some of the data that's coming into the use form. So let's go and do that. Even though we have the item up here, we need the item ID. And this item ID is actually going to be the to-do ID. The item itself is going to be whatever is the item for that. And this one is going to be completed equals to do completed. Let's see if we're getting that in the form now. As you can see, we've got this back, and if we click into it, then we do see the ring for our inputs. Now let's go ahead and try to update one. So I'll do this one. We'll say updated, press enter, and nothing happens. But something had to have happened, right? If we click out of this, this still stays. If we refresh it, it still stays. So it was actually submitted to the database. It is updated on the back end, but we didn't have any clear sort of clarification on how that works. What I want to do is I want to make it so that after it's been put in the database, everything was successful, we can actually change the state of this input. But to do that, we need a reference. Now back in here, the easiest way to do that is to create a variable. So we'll say const, and then I'm going to call it item input. And then I am going to use ref, and that ref is going to be coming in from React from up here. In here, I'm just going to say that that equals null. Then we're going to put it in the input right here so that that gets updated like intended. Here I'm going to say ref equals input item input. Let's come up here. Now that we have that, what we can do is on success, we can change the state of the input. On success, we'll say item input dot current dot blur, and that will remove the input focus so that we can get that correct. Item input and item input, that should be good. So let's save that and let's try it again. I'm going to say again, enter. And as you can see, that's the whole, well, it should be the whole thing. If we go down to the end, maybe I'll make that a bit bigger. Yeah, because you can't see the full lines on here. I'll fix that. Let's open up the element here, 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 here. Okay, so let's do that. We'll come down here and we'll say that this side, we'll say the class name equals width 3/4. And here we'll do with full. Much better. Now we can see everything. We're able to update these. Now what I want to do is set it up so that we can, I'll make a space for this too, but now we can also start working on the complete and incomplete functionality. So to handle that spacing, I'm just going to do space X as 6, and that should be good. I'm not going to check it so that we can continue on. But let's go ahead to the web routes and start working on a function for that. One here, I'm going to copy this one, and I'm actually going to make a custom route. This one will be put instead of patch. That's why I'm putting it down here so that it doesn't overlap on anything. And the name of this, I'm going to say update completion. You could always make another controller, but for one function, I don't think it's all that necessary. And I'll go ahead and paste that in here so that we have that. And that's the name of the function that we'll be using. So we'll go up to the controllers, and I am going to create it right under this one here. I am going to create it, and I'll copy this one because it'll be similar. And this will be update completion. Now, because our request, our to-do, already has the item being changed so that it's updated, we're only changing the completed function on here. We're not going to need any validation on here. And what we're going to do is look for that completed value. We're going to have a conditional if else. And so we're going to first look for if the request completed does not equal 0. In this case, 0 will equal false, and then 1 will say that that equals true. If the request completed does not equal 0, then I'm going to grab this. Then we are going to update the completed of that to-do. And we're going to change that to now be 0. Else, we're going to change it to 1. Because we're going to be using this for both the completed and the incompleted, essentially saying that if the completed is being changed to incomplete, then we want to mark that. If the incomplete is changing to completed, then we want to mark that. That's all that this is saying in here. Let's go and do that on the front pages so that we can implement that. Come down to our to-do item, because remember, everything is happening in this one small component, whether it's complete or incomplete, everything is happening in here. Now, the first thing that we need to do in here is add to our use form the next function, which is put, because that's what we're using. So I'm going to put that here, put that here, and then I'm going to come down under this function here, and we're going to say const update, we'll call it comp equals, let me give that some space, update comp, we'll say put, and then our route, which is to-dos dot update completion. That's the special function that we made for the controller. We're going to pass in the to-do. And then all we really need to do from there is we'll just do preserve scroll. And we'll say that that equals true. And that's all we really need to do. If we want to console log out the to-do, we can do that here, log the to-do. Let's come down to our buttons. And now for this button, which is the complete incomplete, we'll change the text on it in a minute. But for this one, we're going to say that on click equals the update comp. Hopefully that should work. Let's give that a try. Refresh. And for now, I'm going to close this. I don't foresee an error, but who knows? We'll click that complete. And now it's down here. We'll do it so that it's closer. So this one, complete, it is now down here. Now we can undo that and it's back up here. We can undo that and that's back up here. Great. So this is actually working out pretty well. I've just made some of these complete. What I want to do is I want to set it up so that the button, if it's incomplete, I want to have the button say complete. And if it's complete, then I want to have the button say undo, because right now all the buttons say the exact same thing. And that's actually going to be really easy because we have the to-do already in here and we have the to-do completed already in here. We can just change that and make it conditional. In here on this button, I am going to put some curly brackets, and all this is going to say is if to-do dot completed equals 0, then, and if not, then. What are we going to do here? Well, if it's equal to 0, that means it's not completed. That means it's false. Refresh, and I need to change that because our completed is true if it's 1. If the to-do completed equals 1, meaning it has been completed, then we can do undo. If it hasn't been completed, then we will show complete. So let's do that. Okay, now that looks a lot better. Now we can click. Now they all say undo, the ones that aren't done. And then we can click that back, and now it has the correct text on it. Now, of course, I've gone ahead and saved the easiest part for last, which is the deletion of a to-do. Basically, what I want to do is I want to be able to click this, and actually I want a little finger over that, like a little cursor pointer. We'll fix that in a minute. But for the delete, I want to be able to delete this and just have it be gone for whether it's completed or not. We start with the web route. Do this. This will be delete. This will be destroy. And then destroy. Let's go to the to-do controller. And all this function is going to do is look for that to-do that we'll be passing in and delete. Very simple. Now we can close this up. We can close all of that up, and then we can come back to our to-do item and start setting up that function. Now let's go ahead and start with the top to the bottom. And as part of our form, we have our patch, our put, and now we need to add our delete. But what we need to do is specify what the delete is. Delete will actually be our destroy method. So we'll come down here, and under these two, we'll create another function, const delete to do equals something. What do we do here? Well, we could just destroy because that's what we named it up top. And then we're going to destroy the routes. For that will be to-dos dot destroy, pass in the to-do, and then here we'll also just do preserve scroll. Equals true. That means we can come down here now to this button and we'll say on click equals delete to do. And I'm going to put cursor pointer on here. Just so that looks a little bit better. Okay, so let's give this a try. Gonna refresh that for good measure. I want to add some of these down below here. We'll go ahead and we'll delete one, and it's gone. It's not here. It's not here. If we go ahead and delete, let's say this one, it is gone. It is not up here. It is not up here. Just so that you can see that they're actually being deleted and not just put somewhere else. And if we go ahead and refresh, as you can see, everything is the way that it's intended. But what I want to do is I want to, instead of just deleting it like that, I'm going to just very simply do a little alert, a confirmation alert. And that's something that we can do really quick. If we head up to this delete to do function, before we actually get to the destroy, we'll do if confirm. And then all I want to say on the confirm is, are you sure? If that does happen, then we'll do this. Let's go and give this a try. So if I want to delete this one, we get a confirmation saying, are you sure? If we click cancel, then nothing happens. And if we refresh, it's still there. But if we press delete, we say okay, then it's gone. Refresh. You could obviously put whatever sort of implementation of that you want to do here. But for me, that's pretty simple enough. If you're enjoying the content, please go ahead and click that like button, as it really does help out the channel. Here's a video YouTube thinks you'll like, and here's a playlist to follow along. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.